All right, awesome. So, Chad, thank you so much. Thank you so much just for hopping on this call and for
Yeah.
offering your time to give us this testimonial. We really appreciate it. Hostage Tape, for everyone who's involved, for the founder, it's a huge passion. There's a huge need for mouth tape and for messaging and good mouth tape that works. So we just really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's dive right in then, Chad. How about you just kind of give us some background on what kind of got you into mouth taping in the first place, and then specifically Hostage Tape?
Yeah. So so I have sleep apnea myself, and I work in the dental field. And once I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, I started this path of finding out that we can treat sleep apnea in the dental clinic as well. And a lot of the science that we learned in sleep apnea treatment and prevention revolved around the removal of mouth breathing. Whether you use a CPAP machine or whether you use an oral appliance to treat sleep disorder breathing, the key is to make sure that we're not mouth breathing, because the mouth has no function for breathing, right? So once I just kind of found out about lip taping in general, I think through some other practitioners overseas somewhere, I started out with medical micropore tape, which seemed to be the standard and still kind of is. But like I've heard from several other people, it doesn't stay on very well. I have a beard, so bearded people have a hard time with it. So something a little bit more adhesive, and then it doesn't come off in the middle of the night. And as an Instagram follower, I just came across Hostage Tape and started using that. And now, I use it every night when you guys have it in stock. I'm actually out right now, but so
the demand is pretty high.
It is pretty high. And so in the office that I work for, we treat people with sleep disordered breathing, and a huge part of that treatment process is the removal of mouth breathing. So lip tape is always encouraged. We even start young. We're doing kids and we're doing adults, and we're starting lip taping 5, 6, 7 years old. So my journey has been my treatment of sleep apnea and then treating others with sleep apnea, and using lip tape as that in that process has been hugely successful. So, and Hostage Tape has really kind of set the bar for where people should be at as far as like putting out lip tape and encouraging people with lip tape. Had a little bit of feedback on the Hostage Tape part, but I mean, being former military, I don't care, let's do it. I'm all about it. So, but I still promote it. I still push it out to people, and we have discussions about it. So it's great. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the name is, just kind of that play on words, right? You look like a bit of a hostage with your mouth taped shut.
Yeah.
As well, you're held hostage to poor sleep as well, right? So that's kind of the play on words.
Yeah, that's a new way to look at it. I have not done that yet. So awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea, is you're a hostage no more when you start using Hostage Tape. So that's the idea there.
Love it.
That's really cool, because that's something that you don't hear or for me personally, I haven't heard a whole lot of before. I remember I was 9 when I can first remember saying to someone that I couldn't breathe through my mouth. And it was 20 years later that I first came across the notion of mouth breathing being bad. I had heard that insult before, oh, you're a mouth breather or something, and it never really made sense. Nobody ever really seemed to know what it meant or where it came from. But it's just one of those things that's never talked about. So that's really cool that you guys, that's one of the things that you kind of target, is just we need to stop this mouth breathing. That's the main thing. So have you found that Hostage Tape is just kind of the cream of the crop when it comes to the mouth tapes? You mentioned you have a beard. I know for myself, the other medical tapes I've tried, they all fall off. Yeah. Is that kind of what you found then?
Yeah, so far I have. I've tried some other lip tapes that are better at staying on, but in the mouth taping process, I think what people miss is you see a lot of these crisscross or up and down, and the goal really is to completely restrict mouth breathing. So running it all the way across and making sure it's completely concealing your mouth and keeping those lips shut and not allowing it to move through. I think lip tape from what I found is the best top of the line at it. So yeah. But like I said, like the medical micropore tape, it falls off. I even double up sometimes. I'll use like a skinnier tape and then a bigger, fatter piece of tape. So, and with hostage tape, it's always just one piece, you know, not like extra pieces and putting on extra, and then making sure they adhere onto my beard right. So, hands down, you know, has been
yeah, exactly. I've tried it all.
better.
Before I started using hostage tape, I'd be like, okay, can I get something just on my lips so it doesn't like fall off my hair? And then, And then you're like just on my lips, and then a piece over top, and your whole mouth is taped up, and it's still like peeling off. Or you wake up at 2 a.m. and it's somewhere in the blankets, and it's
here or on your back.
Yeah, just a total waste of time. How do you find people are when you recommend lip taping, and then when you kind of recommend hostage tape? How do you find that people respond to those two things?
Lip taping is still pretty new. And, you know, the only reference, I guess I would assume the generalized public would have to covering your mouth with a piece of tape is a hostage situation that you see in film, right? And people are like, oh my God, like I'm, you know, covering my mouth. I won't be able to breathe. What happens in the nighttime? What does that look like? And I wish there were more science on it, on that process, but really, you know, your body has the mechanism to wake yourself up in your sleep. So even in that position with your mouth tape closed, your body will signal itself to wake up. The other side of that too is the mouth, once again, has no function for breathing. So the only time we should be breathing is when we're fight or flight, when we're getting ready to run away or getting ready to fight something. That sympathetic response is activated, and the mouth breathing is the signal for that. So really, if we can get more nasal breathing, we can get people more into that parasympathetic response, rest and relaxation, especially during sleep at night, because that's the brain's recovery time. So that's extremely important to be able to remove that, because we have not developed the mechanism to keep our mouths closed. We don't develop that way anymore. So there's really not just, you know, with hostage tape, but there's a whole science around it that's out there. And it's pretty incredible that you guys are kind of leading the fight in that. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the cool thing. As I've started to explore it more, you see just how like jaw structure has changed, and how the way like the way we live in society is now, how you don't have those big strong jaws anymore, and your mouth just everything kind of falls open. So it seems very foreign. And you'd say like, well, no one had to tape their mouth before and they were fine. But it's like, well, things are different now. Like our society and the way that we're living now is quite different, and our facial structure is changing, that we need to kind of take these steps, minor in terms of like some of the things that happen when it comes to breathing, right? Like just a piece of tape over your mouth, but we need to take these steps to make sure that our nose is still functioning.
Yeah. I even like when we have moms in here that are either new moms that are breastfeeding or they're pregnant, you know, it's like when we encourage them to lip tape and they have this hesitation, it's like, well, your kids are going to develop this too. So, you know, do you want to breastfeed for 4 years, or do you want to lip tape your child, you know, and correct it that way when they're older? And I know, you know, removing breastfeeding, we don't really want to do, but we also operate as a whole as a society, and it's just not really common for people to do that anymore. So, you know, to have that backup measure for it, like lip tape or hostage tape is key. Yeah.
And I know I've got 2 little sons, and they've just started seeing, like, they'll come in the morning and I'll still have my mouth tape on. And there's been a couple of times my 4-year-old, he'll kind of just like ask what I'm doing, and I'll just say, oh, it just helps me breathe better. But so I'm trying to slowly normalize it, because in a couple of years I'll probably be slapping some on him as well.
Yeah, I have a 17-year-old, and he lip tapes too. He uses hostage tape.
That's awesome. That's so great. Yeah, I'll
sorry,
go
I
in
didn't
and
interrupt you.
No, I'll go in and I'll tuck him into bed, but sometimes I'll see his mouth is open, so I'll take a video and send it to my wife, or just show it to my wife and say like, hey, he needs to have some mouth tape on, and then I'll just pinch his lips closed, and then you can see it, like they just start breathing through their nose at that point, and then they're fine. Like it's there's nothing's going to happen. The body knows what it's doing when it comes to waking itself up and breathing through your nose. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, before you were diagnosed with sleep apnea, is this something that you were aware of, or is this something that you discovered since since having sleep apnea?
Yeah, since having sleep apnea before, I didn't really think about it. I was pretty new in the dental field when I kind of made this discovery, maybe like a year into it. And prior to that, I was in the military, so like I didn't think about that kind of stuff. So moving into that, I noticed, and treating hygiene patients, right? So we have a lot of patients that come in, and it's the typical: do you brush twice a day? Do you floss? Do you use mouth rinse? And they're doing all of those things, but they still have bloody gums. Every time I floss, I bleed. The science tells us if you're doing all the things that we tell you to, you shouldn't have these conditions. So for me, I started to become aware of this factor that was involved in gingivitis and gum bleeding, and that was the dry environment that's created by mouth breathing, right? And then as we figured out the science of sleep apnea, we realized, oh crap, these people's tongues are weak, they're falling on the floor of their mouths are opening in their sleep, and they're breathing and they're sucking that air straight in and out of their mouth. It's drying out all their tissue. So how do we get that? And the patients that I have that regularly lip tape now, their gum tissue is super healthy, and they're brushing and cleaning the same way they're supposed to, but they're not having bleeding from flossing, things like that. Things like that. So when I realized that, I'm like, oh crap, like we have this huge kind of like mini epidemic where people are mouth breathing constantly and they don't realize what it's doing to their bodies. So now it's like this huge, you got that uphill battle, right? You're telling people new information that they've never heard before.
Yeah.
And resistant to it. So finding new ways to get that information out there, like what you guys are doing is awesome.
Yeah. And it's crazy that you mentioned that. So I've had my whole life, just every time I've gone to the dentist, it's been, you have, like gingivitis or gum infection or cavities. Mm-hmm. They'd always check and everything's always inflamed. And it was 6 months after I started mouth taping, this was last year, that I went into the dentist, and 0 cavities and perfect gum health. And they were like, "Oh, are you flossing more?" And I said, "Honestly, no. I'm just like I'm taping my mouth closed." And they looked at me like I was crazy. But they said, "Okay, all right, keep doing it then, because it's working." And it was crazy, because you hear all the benefits of, like less, like deeper sleep, and you won't snore as much and all those sort of things, less dehydrated in the morning. And that was one where I was like, this is thousands of dollars a year potentially, right? Like if you get into like root canals and just even like 3 cavities a year, and then I was like, this is huge, just the difference that it made. And they were shocked, and I was just like, I'm never going back. It was at that moment where I was like, it is totally worth the investment, because if it's like 50 cents a day, but I'm saving myself, $700, $800, $900 at the dentist a year, then it's paying for itself. Sure. So that was one of those ones I thought was just, that was crazy. I was not expecting that. That's for sure.
Well, even like we refer to as calculus, or like that hardened buildup that accumulates mostly on the back of your bottom front teeth, but sometimes up in the molar area. But even in school, we learn like, oh, that's just calcified plaque. Well, what if the patient has optimal plaque control, right? So that doesn't make sense that their plaque would be on their teeth long enough to calcify. So as doing more research and looking into it more, we just figured out that, these are calcium ions in our saliva that are meant to remineralize our teeth, and instead they're accumulating in like massive forms or varying degrees for different people based on their saliva flow on the back of their teeth. Once again, another mouth breathing that only happens in a dry environment. So if you remove that dry environment, the saliva will work beautifully and keep on going. So
right. Yeah, that's the thing. They'd always tell me, they'd say like, "Oh, your saliva comes in so quickly, your mouth is so dry." And I would tell them that I couldn't breathe through my nose, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's why." But for years, there was never any mention of maybe you should try to fix that. It was just like, okay, that's the way it is. And that's honestly, when I read James Nestor's book, Breathe, that was the first time I'd ever heard of mouth breathing being bad. And in my head, I was like, oh my God, I've done this for 20 years, and I've talked about it and joked about it, and no one's ever really said otherwise. Like, it was just so crazy how how few people know about it, and even still, like we'll talk about it, and people are like, "Well, mouth breathing's not a problem." You're like, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'll challenge that all day long. There's so much science as you go deeper too, like like prostate cancer, or people that frequently urinate during the night. The one of the sciences we follow behind that is, once again, we go back to the sympathetic response and the mouth breathing. And once the body signals the difference between, the brain doesn't know if Patrick is mouth breathing and getting less oxygen, or Patrick is being strangled by someone on the street, let's say. So what the body does when it signifies that sympathetic response, it begins to pull oxygen from different areas of your body, right? So in sleep, it's going to start to pull from the urinary tract, which it deems unnecessary. When you start pulling oxygen from the urinary tract, it wants to void, right? So if people are mouth breathing during the night, getting decreased oxygen intake, and they're also peeing a ton during the night, if you can remove that, you could theoretically decrease the chances of that person having disease later on in life.
Yeah. Wow. That's something I hadn't heard of before, man.
It's great. It's
just incredible. Once you start looking into it, you're like, this is just so mind-boggling, and so few people are talking about it.
Yeah, it is. Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
That's exactly how I responded the first time I heard it too.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
I'm like, what is this?
It was my brother-in-law told me about it, and I was like, get out of here. Like, that's not real. And then he was like, hey, just read the book. Just read the book. Have you had some pretty crazy responses from people when you've told them? Maybe not your patients, because obviously you're the expert in that situation, but friends, family, where they just kind of laughed at you, or?
No, they don't really laugh at me. I do a bunch of crazy things. Like, I tell my patients to eat liver and heart and things like that too. So I get more of a negative response from that than I do Mouthtape. So, but no, I haven't. People are more curious about it than anything. So it's all in like the delivery and really using yourself as an example. I don't ever tell my patients to do things that I have not done or won't do myself. So having that personal knowledge and experience, they seem to resonate with them a little bit more. So
very cool.
I don't have too much pushback or difficulty with it. Now, when they go home after I give them lip tape, that's a different story. But the patients that come back and actually do it, we do see progress and results from it. So positive.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. And how do you find the medical community is responding to this? Are you kind of like a one-off where you're leading the charge in all of this, or do you find that there's a growing movement towards this?
I always hope there's a growing movement. I don't really discuss it much with other professionals, like the people in the office. We talk about it. I'm kind of like, I'm either here at the office working or I'm at home. So I'm not like out in the public talking to other professionals and other dentists or anything like that. So I haven't but I've seen I think there was something on the news recently where they talked about it, and I think it was a little bit short-sighted. I don't think they did enough research on it. And so there's always like this hesitation where, what if the patient actually does not wake up from lip taping? That one patient that does it, and everybody's scared of that. So they kind of have that hesitation. I don't care. I know what this is doing to these people. Yeah. So it's worth that risk. And plus we have built-in mechanisms. We underestimate the human body and its ability to function all the time. So that plays a huge factor in how much I push for people to do this stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's been something that is trending on a lot of social media. So I also saw just a brief video. One of the major news outlets was just kind of saying, pretty much just saying like, hey, this is a trend not to follow. And when I was like, oh my goodness, like, give me your research. Let's hear some of these testimonials. Come on.
Yeah. But and I saw it and I'm like, we've been going to sleep apnea treatment classes in dentistry for some pre-COVID. And the classes that we go to, they promote lip taping. So when I saw, I'm like, we're paying thousands of dollars to get this training for people to tell us to lip tape, and you're on the news telling us that it's basically BS or a trend. Like that's not real. So there's there's, not good communication, people aren't doing their research right,
Yeah.
and what you guys are doing with this, especially with this YouTube channel, I think I hope to see it blow up.
Yeah, and that's kind of our goal, right? Is to get by some of that hesitation. Is if we can just build up a huge amount of testimonials and people just saying like, "Hey, try it. You got to try it. Here's what it does for you." We can just spread the word as much as possible and try to help as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Because I know there are doubts. I know for me, I was worried to do it at night, so I just put it on through a TV show. And I just tried to say like, hey, I'm just going to make it 20 minutes. And then I tried a movie. So it was like 2.5 hours. And I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And I know like my heart was racing. The first time I like sat there in front of the TV show, I was so nervous. But then you're like, you know what? You're fine. And you realize that. And you're like, okay, I'm all right. My nose actually works. Like this is going to be okay. So
yeah, our we do that. We do that with the kiddos too. It's like, we do this kind of expansion therapy is craniofacial bone growth, and these kids have to keep the appliance in their mouth, especially in their sleep. So when they're having trouble, we say, try and tape your lips closed for sleep, but do it like half an hour before bed, get used to it, and then go to sleep like that. So
right.
Yeah, that's a good like segue into just being able to do it all night, like do it while you're awake too. Who says you can't? I even do workouts, lip tape sometimes too.
Yeah.
So I've had runners in here and I've talked to them about lip taping, and they're like, I think I might try doing some running with lip tape and see how that progresses.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've just recently started running with it, and I find it just your anxiety levels when you start getting tired, they're just so much lower. And then there's never any cramping, which is awesome. Like you don't feel like you're cramping at all. And
sure.
I just recently got back into running, but I was like, hey, let's go for it. You got a couple people looking at you, but whatever, whatever, right?
I had a lady report me for wearing a bomb vest when I was wearing a weighted vest one time.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm running with my dog in the park. I'm not wearing a bomb, I ran right by you. You didn't explode, did you? So
exactly. Doesn't matter what you do, people are going to give you weird looks, right? So, yeah. Well, that's so awesome. So Chad, I just want to say just thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for doing this.